Well, I always loved this match. It was, I always liked Kevin. I had a lot of respect for him, and when they made him champion, I really wanted to do all I could to help him be the kind of like, okay, you're going to make this guy the franchise guy and a guy who's going to take over my spot. I had no hard feelings about that. I kind of stepped back and tried all I could to help him be the guy that they needed. And I really, looking back on, I think what was really going on was that they needed a big, because WCW had just signed Hogan, or Hogan was with WCW by then.
That's right. Yeah.
And so they needed a big giant. They like, instead of keeping the belt on me, they went, no, we need a big guy to compete with Hogan. And so they decided to groom Kevin Nash. And I've always said that Kevin was a little early. It was a little too soon for him. He just wasn't quite ready for that yet. He was, I would say, about a year or 2 years away. Like when he 2 years later, he had more experience and he was better equipped to actually be the star of the show and be the guy that they needed. But it wasn't my place to make those decisions, or when they come in and say this is what we want. It's like I was always a team guy. And so I really tried my hardest to make him and establish him and give him the credibility he needed, and including the matches I had. I had him at the King of the Ring before he won the title. I had him at right after he won the title. I wrestled him at, I think, the Royal Rumble, and I had some different scenarios with him all the time. But when they decided to pull the plug on him and they were taking the title from him and going to put it back on me, I had a lot of respect for him, and I had great empathy for him. I felt, he was like me, another one of those guys that, they promised him when they put the belt on him that they were going to keep him champion for a long time. They were going to, not to worry that they're going to, he's going to be their guy for a long time. And, and then they pull the plug on you. It's a little hard to swallow. It's like, geez, I didn't see it coming, and he never saw it coming. And the same thing happened to me quite a few times. It got where every time I won the belt, I started to realize that there's no promises here that you could be champion for 10 minutes,
Yeah.
But anyway, going back to the match, it was like I really wanted to have a classic with Kevin. I wanted it to be a great match. And I think that's what I love about the match was that, you got a guy 7 feet tall and you got another guy that's 6 feet tall, and, two champions, or one's a former champion. And it's like, how do you want to tell this story? And, I think the way we told that story, it was a real battle. It was a real hard knockdown, drag out kind of battle, and everything looked pretty solid. I mean, there's little things in that match that are very believable. And Kevin, he was actually, to me, it was a really good wrestler. I've always had a lot of respect for him as a worker. He's a big guy that wanted to have a good match. He was a little reluctant. I remember when I talked to him, originally gave him the finish, because it was my finish, the table spot, going through the table.
Yeah.
And I said to Vince, I said, there's something about if you went through the table, if you did it in a suspenseful way where no one knew he was going to go crashing through the table, or that I was going to go crashing through the table. And I told him about how he sort of launched me backwards through the table, and we break the table. It would stun everybody, and it would actually mean something. Where people would really believe that I was really hurt, and that it was a moment of complete shock. And especially back then, like now, you see guys go through tables all the time, and trust me, nobody goes through a table like the one I went through. That table was solid, totally. They actually gimmicked that table, and then they glued it back together or reinforced it with a piece of wood underneath. And I remember going, that table was indestructible when I went crashing through it. It was such a stiff table.
Yeah.
It was one of those kind of matches. Kevin was in an awkward spot, being a guy 7 feet tall, wrestling a guy my size, because it doesn't take very long. It takes a couple of seconds in the match, and people start cheering for me, and they get behind me. All I had to do was take a front turnbuckle and a couple of things, and all of a sudden I'm lying in the ring, a wounded soldier kind of thing, and the crowd's going to get right behind Bret Hart. And there goes Kevin's push. Like it's so hard then, because once you become the heel, then it's like you're a bad guy, and the whole match has a different direction. Yeah. And the way to prevent that from happening was that Kevin and me would kind of play tennis. Like we'd go back and forth. I'd stop him. I'd take a little heat up on him, but not enough where it's like it started to, because like it can work the other way around. If Kevin sells too much, or for like being the smaller guy, if I start beating on Kevin and really working him over, people are going to start cheering me because they want to see, and they're going to start thinking that he's a big flake, for letting the guy beat on him too much. So I can't beat on him for very long, otherwise he starts to lose momentum too. And at the same time, if he starts beating on me too much, it's like he becomes a bully. Right. And there's a real thin line there how you handle that, and the way to handle that in wrestling psychology is to go a little bit for me, a little bit for you, a little bit for me, a little bit for you, and you just keep playing tennis back and forth. And that's how we built that match. It was nobody really had any momentum till the end. And when the end came, it was a very sort of different finish. No one had seen it before. It was unique, especially for that time period, and caught everybody off guard. And it was like, oh, he put his guard down and I small packaged him. Now, the 2 power bombs he gave me at the end were like super stiff.
I think that kind of saved him really a lot of face too, though. Like, his showing his frustration and still, got to keep his character alive because he just, he kind of outsmarted him there in the end. But
there's little things in that match. There was some part in that match where I remember biting his hand.
Yeah, he was going for the jackknife, and you grabbed him, and
my feet hit the ropes, and then I bit his arm out of it, and then I kicked him.
Yeah, Mr. Perfect was on commentary, and he was making a big deal about that.
Yeah, I remember that.
But when I watch that match back, when I see that little spot, I know it's nothing special, but I go, that moment, that little spot where I bite his hand or his arm or whatever it is, I'm biting him, and how he sells it. It's so credible and so real. You go, if he was biting my hand like that, it's the little details of realism that can make a match stand out. And, that whole match from him, running me into the posts, and even that sort of, we had a spot where I had to tie his feet up with the
XLR cable. Yeah, it was a microphone cable.
The idea was, at in those days was like, we got to do something different so we don't just do the same old thing every night that everyone sees. And that was an idea we had, and unfortunately what happened was that the rope with the cable was too short, and it was really hard to tie that knot. And when I tied that knot, it was tied like a real knot. He couldn't get that knot undone.
Yeah, you double knotted it, and I was like, that's kind of mean. That does look hard to untie.
And but so it kind of messed up. If I had a little bit more length with that rope, a little more room with it, I could have done it. Would have been a simple spot, simple. But I tip my hat to that kind of stuff. I go, at least we were trying to do something different. We tried. It was an idea, and it doesn't necessarily stand out as a great idea, but it was an idea. And I give points for being different and trying to come up with something that people haven't seen before, to mark that match as different than the one we had before that, which was different from the one before that. And you get points for stuff like that, even if it doesn't necessarily come across.
Yeah, and I mean, you look at a hardcore or no disqualification match now, and a couple things struck me compared to a hardcore match now or a no DQ match now, as opposed to the one you had with Kevin here. And that is, first of all, like a lot of hardcore matches now, no DQ matches, there's a lot of plunder, kendo sticks, trash cans, all kinds of stuff. I really appreciated how you two worked together to make the ring really a weapon. Does that make sense? Like, you didn't have to...
Yeah, and we just used the props around us.
Yeah, I really appreciate that.
The stairs, the railings, the cable on the floor, the bell, anything like that. For me, it was a good, a real good class. To me, that's a classic match. I know a lot of people watch different matches with different, different guys I've wrestled and stuff. They're all kind of different, but I always thought that match with Kevin Nash was a classic. It wasn't just a good match. It was a great match. It was very different than anything we'd done before. And, I think if you want to watch a real classic, people throw the word classic around all the time, but that was a classic. And I know that whenever I've talked to Kevin Nash over the years, he's always said that was his favorite match that he ever had in his whole life. And I would stand by that match as being a classic.